Welcome to Building Solid Foundations Radio. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are on KCAA 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, all over Southern California. We are also on your favorite podcast platform, or you can catch us on streaming on Roku, Fire TV, or Android on the Building Solid Foundations channel, coming soon to the Apple platforms. Today, we are talking with two very special guests in the studio. The first is Dr. Jennifer Gerges. She holds degrees in psychology from UC Irvine, from Chapman University, which actually I am an alum of Chapman University as well, with the Argia School up there, and from Walden University, and she holds license as a marriage and family therapist. We'll get more into what else she does too, but sitting next to her, we've had him on the show previously talking about traumatic brain injury and CTE among football players and other athletes, is NFL great Wes Chandler. Wes Chandler is founder and president of WCTE, which was launched in 2019, and they are focused on all things related to traumatic brain injury and CTE in diagnosis, prevention, and identifying what the issues are. So welcome both of you. I know you work together. You are partnered in helping people with these brain issues. Now, Dr. Jennifer, your emphasis is in behavioral health, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And that is one aspect. When we talked with Wes in a previous show, we mentioned that behavioral was one piece of the puzzle. So fill us in on how that fits into this issue of traumatic brain injury and CTE.
So a traumatic brain injury, it's going to go hand in hand with any kind of mental health issue, especially depression, PTSD. Aside from the physical element of the physical component of trauma, there's the mental health component of trauma. So in my years of treating patients with traumatic brain injuries, we've tried to, also kind of combine the services as best as we can, and trying to obviously understand and go to like the root of where this all first started, because it is a trauma when you first realize that you're going through such a change and adjustment in your life. The things that you used to do, you can't do anymore.
Okay, I remember, Wes, you telling us last time you were not able to sign your name.
Just sign my name. So
just the brain and the hand just weren't talking to each other anymore.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and it can be very scary, right? It's just a very terrifying moment when you're not, yourself, the identity of who you were so proud of, being this one individual, whatever your background may have been. Whatever the root of the cause, if it is because of being a professional, NFL player, or it is being an ex-veteran from the war and having traumatic brain injury because of that, or an injury from a car accident. There's going to be different causes, but the result's the same, sadly, with the physical element, the mental health, and we're going to target the mental health component, the behavioral health on our end. And a lot of it with treating individuals that come to us, currently there's a lot of other modalities outside of CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I pretty much would say I'm a pro, because that's what I would be doing for years. Okay. I would always be treating a lot of my patients with CBT. And it's been known to be very effective. But in combination with a lot of other treatments that are out there, like PRTMS, I think that can be very, very helpful because it's also non-invasive, right? There's the non-medication component, which I think a lot of people are for that. If I don't have to take a pill, I think it makes them very happy not to go that route. If they don't have to,
always have to take the pill.
Yeah, if they don't have to, right? Because I know there are going to be some cases that you may need to, right? I'm not here to say that I'm against pharmaceuticals or medication, because I do see in the years of some of my patients, I do benefit from that as well. They may have to see a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner in order to get the right medication, in combination with the talk therapy, with all the other resources that are out there. I think it's not just a standalone, because we work together as a team. And I think the more we work and collaborate, the better result we're going to get in helping individuals that come asking for that help.
Okay. And Wes, what led you to form the partnership with Dr. Jennifer with WCTE? How does that fit into the overall
Because again, I
picture?
realized that even as a professional athlete, and we isolate the professional athlete, but I know that there is more than just the brain that they're suffering from, and even with the brain injury, they have the body injuries, they have chronic pain. But again, when we look at professional players, they suffer from a mental perspective and a behavior perspective. You can play the game, you can have bad days, and it'll put you in a bad behavior. Right. You can go off and rant, right? But a lot of times that comes because you're doing all this head banging and you playing this gladiator sport, as we mentioned in our earlier segments, that it does something to you differently. Your testosterone is at a different level when you're playing a gladiator sport such as football.
Right.
Now, there's the mental aspect. You're going home. I used to like to say that I don't want to live next to the facility where I practice.
Right.
I want to leave that behind me. I want to be as far away as I can.
Compartmentalize.
So I can, so I want to change. I want to be able to be, I want to be dad. I want to be the husband, whomever, when I get in the house. I don't want to be this gladiator walking into the house and carry that same attitude that I've had on the football field, on the gridiron all day into my household.
So trash talking your kids doesn't work very effectively, does it?
Or the lady
of the house. Yeah, pushing her around, that's not a good thing.
I was gonna say something.
But knowing that these individuals really need, because they go through trying times in their lives, be it the fact that they've just retired and they're having issues at home, family matters, they need someone to talk to. It's a real adjustment when you no longer, you are a has-been or was, right, and you're no longer a current. That's a mental challenge for you altogether. I remember the day I retired, I walked away from the game. I got up the very next morning, I jumped in my car, and I was 5 miles down the road towards Great American Park where the 49ers were practicing. And before I realized, I don't have to do this no more.
I got nowhere to go.
But then it took me a long time to adjust that I wasn't this guy anymore. And I was just a regular, everyday person in society trying to do
And
better.
as time goes on, that gets more and more pronounced, because
Yes.
the day you leave, people still know you are because they saw you play, they saw you on TV.
Yes.
And then 5 years later, people forget, and 10 years later, it's an entirely different fan base.
That's correct.
They never saw you play.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But it takes time for you to get away from having this activity on a daily basis, 7 to 8 months out of the year, and now you're doing nothing. You've played 10, 12 years, which is a long time in a career, career, but a short time in a lifespan. Now you find yourself, your friends are at work, you're home. What do you do with yourself?
Right.
You're bored.
Yeah.
You know, the wife's telling you get out the house,
And,
go
and
do
you,
something.
and you're not getting all the invites you used to when you used to be known by
and you're
everybody.
not getting
That's right.
all of that. Right.
And I, not related to the football or this, I've talked with people in the past. I've done a lot of business consulting, and I teach at college, but it's a management program. And I tell them retirement is not what humans are designed to do. That's a fallacy. That we talk about retirement as a goal.
Yeah.
The human being is not designed to sit down and retire. The human being is designed to have mental challenges and physical challenges and things we have to do every day, problems to solve, objectives, purposes, goals. We are designed to do that. We are not designed to have the easy life of sitting in a chair and watching movies.
That's
all
our
day.
motivation to get through life.
Yeah. And that's why people that buy into that myth tend to have very short retirements before they die. They work their whole life for retirement, and then 7, 8 years later they're gone. And they never, because they sat down and just stopped. The brain stopped, the body stopped. So I understand what you're saying. When that happens at a young age, which coming out of the pro sports, retirement happens early and a lot of times unplanned because you were cut or whatever. And all of a sudden there you are, and you better figure out something else to do.
And one of the other biggest reasons why this was so important is because when some family members, including spouse, girlfriend, whomever, realize that this person is suffering from one of those epidemics stemming from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, guess what? They can't deal with it. It's not an easy thing to deal with, which I understand.
They didn't sign up for that part of it.
They didn't sign up for that part. And I've talked to girlfriends and wives that have left the house that's sitting in a hotel room because they can't deal with it.
Yeah, they married a rock star. They didn't marry someone who needed a lot of help.
Who needed a lot of help.
That's
and
right.
so I'm not certified to do that. Our company's not certified to do that, but I realized that it was an important piece that was necessary to help these people with quality of life. So that partnership became more and more inevitable that it was necessary.
Right. And you know, you tie to that
and not just for the player,
Right.
Steve, for the other individuals, for the spouse to learn how to deal and how to treat, for the girlfriend, for the family members.
and I know that there's obviously females that'll deal with this if they're soccer players, and there's other accident victims, whatever. But predominantly it's male in the sports that are the most violent sports.
Yeah.
And what's also unique is men, we tend to identify ourselves by what we do, and if we don't have what we do every day to say I am this, this is who I am, that will mess with us in our head too and make us feel worthless, which then can exacerbate behavioral issues as well, because we got to take that out on somebody, which we shouldn't.
All
But
the anger issues.
because we're feeling useless, and we don't want to feel useless. We're going to have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. Our guest today is we have Wes Chandler, from former NFL and president and founder of WCTE, and Dr. Jennifer Gurgis, who is behavioral psychology, right?
Yeah, therapist. Yeah.
Behavioral therapist. We'll be right back after this on Building Solid Foundations Radio. I'm your host, Steve Matley.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services, including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing, and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Real Men of Real Estate.
Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA.
Boats, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station, KCAA radio.com.
You can find us on your dial at 102.3 FM, 1050 AM, as well as 106.5 FM.
This is Steve Matley. Join me every Thursday at 3 p.m. right here on KCAA for Building Solid Foundations radio talk show. I spent decades as a professional construction manager, business owner, real estate developer, and a college educator, and I enjoy learning new things from other people. We talk a lot about real estate, business, and finance, but we cover a diverse range of other topics as well. Some of the topics we've discussed in the past few months include real estate investing, leadership, higher education, ADUs, marketing using technology, multifamily rental properties, business strategy, entrepreneurship. You never know who may show up or what they may talk about, so join us right here on KCAA for Building Solid Foundations Radio. Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA Producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA Producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations Radio. Today we are talking with Dr. Jennifer Gerges, a behavioral therapist. We're also talking to Wes Chandler, founder and president of WCTE and former NFL player. And we've been talking about behavioral issues that come out of athletes or other people that are dealing with traumatic brain injury, CTE, or other issues that are long-term, lifetime mental conditions, generally coming from physical trauma of some type. Obviously, this is something that is more prominent among people who spend their career being banged around as boxers, football players, soccer players, hockey players, whatever they're doing, lacrosse, roller derby, whatever they're into, knocking heads around. So that is something that is going to cause lifetime problems. Now, Jennifer, you have a few publications you put out. You have a doctoral study you've done, and you also did a co-author of, I believe, an article. Is that right? Is that a?
Yeah, it's a doctoral publication, refractive
research study type stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
So we wrote one of the chapters on women leadership. And then my study was specifically tying organizational change with mental health, which is very applicable to now running a mental health agency.
Right. So, okay. And so you are obviously an expert in the field. That's why we're here, and why you're working with Wes and his company. Now you're licensed as marriage and family. So the connection I'm going to make is that the behavioral problems are affecting the relationships. Is that correct? Okay. And so part of what you're doing is coming in and not just trying to fix a relationship by saying be nice to each other. It's let's get to the roots. Is there something that's preventing a person who wants to have better behavior that can't have the better behavior because there's something physically wrong there? Is that right?
Exactly. We're trying to help to get to the root of the problem. What is the root of these behavioral changes, as Wes was talking about? Because as we were saying earlier, we were talking about anger management issues. So if you're having outbursts at home with your loved ones, your spouse, your children, obviously that's not healthy, to say the least. And it's a cry for help. Something's not right. Something needs to be, quote unquote fixed. I hate to use that word, but you need the help. You need to go and talk to a professional. And I think us as professionals in this field can try to make those connections that by yourself you're not able to make. As your spouse maybe is just struggling because they are confused themselves. They don't understand why these changes are taking place. So just having these family sessions, marital therapy can be very helpful. Couples therapy can be a big help. Specifically with these specific issues that we're talking about, aside from the individual therapy that will be very helpful, and anything else that may be needed, if it is medication, if it is pure TMS, whatever it is that we can offer, it's going to be really, really helpful. And I know Wes was talking about the partnership, and the partnership with us is with Serene Health, because Serene Health, as we got established, we have so many therapists now, providing telehealth services. So we have about 80 therapists available, which definitely closes the gap to the access issues, right? Because that's the problem right now. It's like a worldwide issue about where can I go get help? I don't know. How hard is it to get a therapy appointment? It is, because the demand is so high, and there's not enough therapists.
And you don't know where to go, because you can look through listings and there's 1,000 different psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, and they're dealing with different things for different people, and they're trained to do different things. So knowing where to go can be very confusing.
It is very confusing for someone that has never even, seeked out
Most
help.
of us don't think about it because we don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
And then when we do need it, we don't have enough information to know where to start.
Yeah, because maybe it's the first time you've had that conversation, possibly, right? For a lot of people coming to us, it could be very terrifying to even just pick up the phone to make that initial consult, to make that initial visit. Takes a lot of courage and a lot of support from their family and loved ones.
Yeah, and when we talked, when Wes was on our show last time, we talked about the stigma that comes with this, where, for anybody, we don't want to have the conversation of, I think I'm losing my marbles, I don't know what to do about it. That's nobody wants to face that, right?
No.
And you're not necessarily going insane. It just there's a physical issue that needs to be addressed that's affecting your thinking and behaving.
Yeah.
And then when you factor then men into it, that again, my experience being one is that we tend to have we're stubborn. We have a little ego.
Macho.
Yeah, we don't like to admit that we need help, right? If we're not going to ask for directions when we're lost, why would we ask for help when we think our brains are going wrong, right? And because we don't want to be perceived as weak. And in the case of the professional athletes, high performing professional athletes, you're talking an alpha male type anyways, right? So you're talking a high performing a monster.
That's right.
And the trick there is the self-control that goes with it. And what they're losing is, when the brain is injured, is they're losing the self-control piece of it. So now they're just the monster without the self-control.
Yeah.
And that's where the problems come in. And that's where they need help. And likely they are the very people that aren't going to sit down and talk to people and say, I need a lot of help.
They're not. And you use the word what? Goliath or gladiator?
Yeah.
What did you say?
Gladiators,
Gladiators.
That's right.
You know, so they do have that mentality and that high level of testosterone and that kicks in, and and then you have the the physical trauma, the emotional trauma, that's all connected. And here we are trying to help these individuals in need, but exactly what you were saying, it's just knowing even where to go get the help. It can be very terrifying.
And for the spouse or the girlfriends, in their defense, there's this guy that has turned into really a jerk, right? And they don't understand.
Yeah,
they don't understand why. They're not trained in psychology. No. Nobody's talked to them about it. Their guy has always been idolized by everybody.
Right.
And all of a sudden, there's how did he morph into this just complete jerk? How did this happen? And so they're not equipped to deal with it either. And so in relationships, that means that when you're hurt, you lash back. That exacerbates the problem.
Yeah,
and then
it gets worse.
Now they end up with marriage and family therapy because and they don't really know how they got to where they are, why they're where they are.
Which is true. And because that guy is still sitting there with an issue, and you have not dissect why he's having those problems.
Right.
So it continues to get worse.
And now she's dealing with emotional trauma because he's abusive.
And he's getting worse.
Yeah, at least verbally, if not physically, but at least verbally. And that takes a toll on someone's mental health too.
Definitely, yeah. So then you're trying to treat the whole family, not just the individual, that has the trauma, but now there's different type of trauma because now you're dealing with the adjustment of your spouse not being the same person that you married.
Yeah, and they really aren't, because the cognitively there's things blocking their thought process. The synapses aren't working right.
Yeah, because that's kind of like the most common thing. I'm like, that's not the person I married. That's what they say to us all the time.
That's the person you married after getting knocked around 1,500 times. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really sad because we are molded that way. I can remember the first time I stepped on a professional football field versus college. He said, the coach said, "Is that the best she can do?"
Right.
And my thought was, and I know what he meant, and I'm like, I better put a little bit more into this, right? So you're taught not to be weak.
That's right.
But to be strong, aggressive.
You don't complain. You don't admit there's pain ever.
None. You don't show a sign of weakness.
That's right.
And so you go through life that way, and it just becomes a natural part of what you do.
Your program.
Well, and everybody around you, the whole culture, puts you on the pedestal and treats you as you're like a Greek god or something.
Yes.
And that you are therefore not subject to the laws of chemistry and physics that every other human is.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, they don't apply to them.
That's right.
Yeah. And that creates, when you have that life, that all that together creates this toxic cocktail in the brain that's a problem. Then you add to physical injury to it. And then, as we mentioned, maybe being cut from a team or having to retire out, and there go all your invitations to the Hollywood parties and all your free restaurants and all this kind of stuff. And all that combined can create a real a real psychological mess for a person.
And it becomes a real, yeah, and that part too can force someone to be a real jerk. You can't get in the club like you used to. You used to get a hall pass. Now you can't.
Yeah. So you mentioned the word has been or were, and that's, nobody wants to be that. Nobody wants to think your best days were behind you.
That's
right. From here on out, it's all downhill. I peaked, and I peaked at a fairly young age, and now I've got theoretically decades to live, and I don't know why I'd want to do that.
That's right. Yeah, and it's really sad, and more I talk to former players and try and get them to help carry and share the message. It's more about awareness and the education part of it, because if we don't continue to educate them about the issues and how to step up and get the treatment, it's a problem in our society, because guess what? Newspapers and magazines in our society are primarily sold and marketed because that person on the cover has an impact on our society. Right? But what happens if it's a monster?
Well, and sensationalism. We love reading bad news.
That's true.
And to some degree, as much as we like our heroes, we kind of like to read about the hero failing, because it makes us feel like, see, they weren't that much better than me anyways. I don't know, whatever that is. And for anybody, we all go through the issue of kind of feeling like maybe we've lost significance or haven't achieved what we wanted. But to process that, it's hard for anybody to process that without all the tools, because you've got a brain injury on top of it. That's where I think we have a real issue, because they don't have all the mental tools in place to deal with all that they're dealing with, all those issues that they say any normal human would have trouble dealing with that. We're going to take another break. We're going to come back in just a minute. I'm talking with Wes Chandler, former NFL and president of WCTE, and Jennifer Gerges. She is a behavioral therapist who partners with WCTE in helping people dealing with traumatic brain injury and CTE. We'll be right back after this. This is Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley.
FireUp Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. FireUp Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services, including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing, and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. FireUp Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA Producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA Producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations Radio. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are in the studio today with Dr. Jennifer Gerges and Wes Chandler, president and founder of WCTE. To get more information from either of our guests today, you can go to WCTEinc.org, WCTEinc.org, and learn about CTE and traumatic brain injury and what Wes Chandler and his organization are doing to help people dealing with that. And to get more information from what Dr. Jennifer is doing, you can go to serenehealth.com, SERENE health.com, serenehealth.com, and learn more about the behavioral side. She is a behavioral therapist with a lot of credentials behind her. I didn't go through her entire bio because it was honestly pretty deep. She's got a lot of credentials from fantastic institutions, publications, and she's been doing this a long time. And I understand why Wes has been partnering with her, helping these people. We've talked in the last couple of segments about some of the issues, what leads to it, and those things. What are the steps we take to overcome it? How do we start helping people recover?
Well, like we said, taking the first step, right? Coming and talking to a professional and acknowledging, right? Because even in therapy, showing up is the first step, but then is acknowledging what it is that you're doing, what are the changes that are taking place, how are you affecting loved ones, taking some sense of ownership. And
now, is a person that's dealing with this able to do that cognitively?
Well, you're supposed to work up to that.
Okay.
It may not come up in 1 or 2 visits.
Yeah. Okay, because I think most people who theoretically have perfectly functioning brains have a hard time with a good self-evaluation and coming up with personal accountability. So if you're dealing with cognitive issues, I would think that'd be even more difficult to get to that point.
And that would be more in the family, like the couples. So from my experience, we would normally start with individual for that reason. Kind of going back to your point, because you need that one-on-one. So you're held accountable with just the one-on-one, that professional. So there's no shame behind it. There's no stigma behind it. You're as a therapist myself, I was always very kind of nitty-gritty, down to earth, keeping it real. That was my approach that really worked, working with pretty much any patient that came, because they're in a vulnerable state. They need the help. You don't want to come in this like entitled, I'm going to tell you what to do. It's like, I'm here trying to understand what it is that you're going through as best as I can as a professional, and giving you the tools so that you can take baby steps, right?
And so this is not a quick fix.
No, it's
because
not.
To get to what's really at the root of someone, you have to have them be honest and transparent with you, which doesn't happen in a short visit. People have to know you, like you, and trust you before they open up.
Building rapport. That's the first thing with the therapy. Yeah, having that connection, meeting the right therapist. Maybe the first one's not going to be the right one for you. May not be the right fit, which is okay, But being an advocate for yourself when you're seeking out treatment would be my advice to everyone out there, because maybe that clinician that's out there is trying an approach that may not fit your needs. If someone's been doing this for a long time, we know that it's not a cookie cutter. We try to see and hear what's presenting, in our couch, so to speak, who's sitting in front of us, who's on that screen now that's telehealth, right? Who's talking to me, and what would be a modality and what kind of treatment that I can put into practice to help. And sometimes it just means having conversations, real conversations for weeks and weeks and weeks, to just build that trust and rapport, so that when you start getting the trust, they'll be listening right to you, and they'll be more open and receptive to the feedback you're going to give them, because you're not going to give that to them on the first, the second, or the third visit, most likely, right?
Yeah. Trusting another human takes time. Yes. So okay.
That's a process. In other words.
Yeah, because they don't want to hear the negative.
Right. Well, and as I say, most of us don't like to be critiqued. We don't like to be told that we're the problem, especially in a relationship. We always know it's the other person's problem. If they would just be this, if they would just do that, if they would just stop saying these things, and we are completely blind to what we do.
Yeah, because if we start that in the first visit, that's not going to go anywhere. People are going to storm out. Well, you're the problem. That's not the kind of, even though we may be thinking in our head as a professional, because kind of what you start already putting the puzzle pieces together.
Help them get there on their own to some degree. Yeah. Okay. And then, because if we get there on our own, then we buy into it.
Exactly.
But we wouldn't admit it to anybody else. But if there's a trusted person in there, that's right. We, that becomes.
And that's a trick. It's being also like almost like the therapist to be able to finesse the kind of the treatment and the way that the therapy leads that person to that point of saying, oh yeah, having that insight on their own, because you're not just going to do a laundry list of things, because it doesn't work very easily to just tell someone what to do.
And then that ties into some of what we talked about in the previous conversation, Wes. Maybe what they need is an EEG or something like that to diagnose physically what could be causing the problem.
And the more and more players you have that's an advocate with them to get it done, the more comfortable they become.
And I think if you tell them, your behavior is the problem, that's different than there's a physical reason why your behavior is a problem, and all of a sudden it's like it's not completely my fault. It's not just because I'm an idiot, it's or just a bad person.
That's right.
It's because there's physically something not working right.
Yeah, my brain is
Let's show you
just
this
not
map.
functioning.
Let's show you what this map looks like, and let's show you how your brain is supposed to function versus where it is and where the neurons are today.
Right. And it's always good to. I think it's good for people to understand. They're more receptive to it when they understand. There is a component of this that is a physical element that was beyond my control.
But just that stigma you were talking about,
Right.
because when there is a physical ailment and you see the brain and you see the scan, like, oh, okay, it's what we call that medical model, right? The medical model is kind of the direction even mental health is going, because people are going to be more receptive, more open to seeing, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, it's not like, oh, you're weak or you're vulnerable. It takes away that aspect and it removes that stigma and the taboo of wanting to seek help. And I think that's why Pure TMS has been so successful in the fact that people see the brain map and they're like, oh, okay, I can see how it's functioning. And then maybe after 10, 20 visits, the sessions that they have, they start seeing an improvement because they have those EEGs every week, and they can gradually start seeing how it's changing. So I think it works really well.
And then for their family, the spouses, children, if they're aware of this, then they understand it's not personal. That it's a person dealing with a problem, and sometimes it manifests itself in an ugly way, but it's not because they're just being mean. It's
That's
not
correct.
just because they hate you. It's because there are things that they can't always control, and they're working. They're doing what they need to improve.
Yeah.
I think that goes a long way to help them
I was
restore.
literally going to say it goes a long way for families, because if a spouse knows that their loved one needs the help and they're willing to put the work and they're out there getting the help, they're there by them side, like, I'm here to support you, right? I love you, and I want to make this work. I want to be there to help you.
And it takes the reactiveness away too.
Yes.
You're not just triggered because every time they say something they're mean. Okay, that's not really you talking.
That's correct.
They can separate that and have that disconnect. Yeah.
That's like in January when we had the dinner, January 29th, we invited a certain number of athletes, former athletes, but we also invited their spouse. So the presentations were geared towards the spouse of understanding the educational part.
Okay.
So that they could understand what this is all about and what's occurring, and also enlightening the player that there's also help for the problems that you're facing. So together we were addressing both.
Right. And that's because the person dealing with it needs to have the support at home. Not a therapist is good, but they need the support at home, because that's the 24/7 part of it. The person who is the support needs to understand what's going on, so they can be supportive and avoid the reactiveness.
Yeah. It's what we call psychoeducation. That comes even if they're not part of like the family system. Sometimes we may just have a visit just with the loved one to educate them as to what their significant other is going through, because they just don't understand it. And once they do, they're more empathetic, and can relate as much as they can to what their loved one is going through, and they can separate it and say, okay, this is not about me right now. This is about my significant other really struggling, and I'm going to do the best I can to be there to support them.
Right, and that, as you mentioned, Wes, earlier, sometimes in these cases the spouse or partner just wants to bail out. I didn't sign up for this mess, and that's probably the worst thing you can do to the person suffering from it, because they're already dealing with everything else, and that's one more notch to prove to them that they're a loser, they got nothing to live for, or whatever.
That's right.
But now they're abandoned, right? And they're left alone, and it's really sad.
And then the one person that's supposed to love me and trust me more than anybody in the world thinks I'm not worthy of dealing with.
And we've seen incidents of such, and it's it's not the greatest thing in the world to see, but for the most part, I think that the partnership is outstanding, and I think it's worth its weight in gold all the way around. More importantly, when you have that support system at home, for them to have a greater understanding, even with the kids, that dad needs help, and we have someone that we can turn to, even on their own, when they are struggling, that I'm trying to do this every day. How about me? Where's my support base? Well,
Yeah, the support needs support too.
Support
That's
needs
right.
support too.
It's what we call caregiver fatigue. It builds up
That's
really,
right.
really quickly.
That's right. Yeah, when you're giving, at some point you have to stop and have
Self-care.
something put into you too. Exactly. Yeah. It's a bank account. You can't keep, we can't keep withdrawing.
Or your
There's got to be some
tank, right?
deposits.
It starts
That's
going
right.
on empty.
That's right.
You need to fill that
Got to be
tank.
some inputs, or there can't be any outputs. That's
That's
right.
right.
Yeah.
So we're going to take another short break. We come back, we'll wrap this up. We got one more segment here, and we're gonna address how can you identify or know if the person you're with is dealing with this, or if you're dealing with this. What are some of the signs, and what should you do first? Again, our guest is Dr. Jennifer Gerges, a behavioral therapist, and Wes Chandler, founder and president of WCTE. And we'll be right back after this short break on Building Solid Foundations Radio.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Real men of real estate.
Men of Real Estate Radio show here on KCAA.
Boats, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station KCAA radio.com.
You can find us on your dial at 102.3 FM, 1050 AM, as well as 106.5 FM.
This is Steve Matley. Join me every Thursday at 3 p.m. right here on KCAA for Building Solid Foundations Radio Talk Show. I spent decades as a professional construction manager, business owner, real estate developer, and a college educator, and I enjoy learning new things from other people. We talk a lot about real estate, business, and finance, but we cover a diverse range of other topics as well. Some of the topics we've discussed in the past few months include real estate investing, leadership, higher education, ADUs, marketing using technology, multifamily rental properties, business strategy, entrepreneurship. You never know who may show up or what they may talk about, so join us right here on KCAA for Building Solid Foundations Radio. Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA Producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA Producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations Radio. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are wrapping up our conversation with Dr. Jennifer Gerges and with Wes Chandler. And we've been talking about mental health, traumatic brain injury, CTE, behavioral issues that come out of that, and how that affects relationships and how that affects quality of life. So in kind of wrapping this up, I want to make this more personal for the listeners that are out there. How can they know if traumatic brain injury, CTE, something similar to that, is potentially the problem that they're dealing with? How would they know?
Well, specifically what it ties to us would be the mental health component, right? That just little symptoms, little changes, that what we were just saying, the adjustment I know for Wes, it was a physical, like literally he couldn't sign his
Right, his
name,
hand wasn't working
like,
anymore,
Yeah, there's
right.
like an actual connection with the brain
And that would be
trauma.
scary.
Yeah, it is terrifying. I would imagine
Right.
being in that place where there's like the physical part, but there's also the behavioral issues that come as a result that may not seem very significant, but just not being able to sleep at night, having insomnia issues it's a big one.
Okay, so because we're told if you have insomnia, it's probably because you spent too much time on a screen before bed. You just need to relax. You need to meditate, whatever. But it could be an issue of a brain injury.
Brain injury, just the sleeplessness, right? Or even the early awakening. Maybe you go to sleep and you sleep for 2-3 hours, but you wake up kind of startled. Maybe you're having nightmares. You're reliving just certain changes that are taking place, or just feeling really down, and just not understanding why you're not motivated, to get off the couch. Maybe your family really wants to get active and wants to do things, but you're like, no, I'm not really feeling the urge of really doing much of anything.
So a lot of the signs of depression.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it ties in right together. So you will have the signs of depression, because it's not just a standalone by itself to have the traumatic brain injury. You're going to start noticing the depressive symptoms that come along with it. And with trauma, with PTSD, there's a lot of the same symptoms, with depression. Sometimes when we're diagnosing our patients, it's not just one simple diagnosis. There may be 2 or 3 diagnoses that we're giving them, because they have heightened anxiety, like a heightened startle response. They're just very kind of on edge, is very jumpy. And they're just not feeling comfortable in their own skin. That's the best way I can describe it, because I've heard it so many times. Patients tell me that I'm just like on edge constantly, 24/7, and hence why I can't sleep, why I can't carry conversations with family, with friends. I just don't feel like myself. I feel like I'm just kind of like standing there physically, but mentally I'm not there. I'm kind of spacing out, zoning out. So a lot of that, you'll start noticing those changes, and sadly people wait, until it gets to a point where they're just completely, lethargic and just not being able to do much of anything.
And most of us would just say, okay, well, they're just being lazy. They're just whatever, right?
Yeah, people don't recognize it as that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. Not to get off that beaten path, but we also had these players go through a heart health scan. And sometimes they think fatigue is just because they're getting a little bit older or tired. Fatigue could be signs of a stroke or heart attack.
That's true.
Okay,
to your point,
circulatory
to your
issues.
point,
Right.
right? So when you look at memory loss, depression, sporadic behavior, those characteristics line up with, these epidemics that stem from CTE and TBI.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's going to affect so many aspects of the individual, right? The
Aggressiveness.
mental health is one part, but then you're dealing with like heart health,
Right.
and brain health, and just neurologically, there's going to be some issues too.
So those symptoms you listed, those are common to a lot of different
Diagnoses,
ailments.
yeah.
A lot of diagnoses. But I have a feeling that most of us aren't thinking one of those could be traumatic brain injury or CTE. That most of us wouldn't
True.
think that, especially if we weren't in a field of a professional athlete, but we could have been in a car accident. We could have hit our head on something at some point.
No doubt.
And those things can seem subtle,
Yeah.
but they can have long-term damage.
I think because it builds
in
up,
mind.
I think that's the
Right.
scary part, because you may be recovering, you're going through all your doctor's visits, right, for the physical aspect of the head trauma, and then you're kind of given the green light, go back to your life,
Right.
and then all of a sudden there's the mental health component that creeps in, and then people are like, what's going on? Like, what do I do now?
Right.
Because the primary care physician, if they didn't pick up on those signs, they may not do the appropriate referral. Like, hey, you may be in need to talk to a therapist.
So as you're working through these things, if you're dealing with any of these symptoms, this is one possibility that it could be this. Don't rule it out. Make sure that you
right.
check everything, but don't exclude having this researched, even if that means going through some tests, whatever you have to do, talking to therapists and getting to the bottom of it to make sure that you are in fact treating the right thing.
Yeah.
There could be a physical component to it.
Yeah.
True, but we also found that the consistency of a combination of those things, like sporadic behavior, aggressive behavior, depression, memory loss, line up.
Yeah.
Okay. So
That
multiple
impulsiveness.
symptoms, they line up.
That line up, yeah.
That impulsiveness is pretty high up there, hence the
Yeah.
behavioral changes that you do
Yeah.
witness.
So if you're out there listening and those are things that seem to raise a flag for you, like, that makes sense, check it out. Now, if you want a starting point, you can go to serenehealth.com, SERENE health.com, serenehealth.com, all one word, no spaces. And then you could also check out WCTEinc.org, WCTEinc.org. That is Wes Chandler's WCTE organization. Most important thing to do is don't rule anything out. You don't want to self-diagnose, but you also don't want to rule things out. So go get things checked, and you can do some research on your own and inform yourself. And if it looks like you've got any of these signs yourself or someone that you're with, someone that's close to you, check it out. It doesn't cost you anything to check the websites, and usually it's not too time or cost intensive to get the initial step, get some initial information and find out what's going on, get to the bottom of it. So I want to thank my guest today, Dr. Jennifer Gurgis. She is a marriage and family therapist and a behavioral therapist, and Wes Chandler, NFL retired and founder and president of WCTE. And I just want to say to both my guests, I really appreciate the work you're doing out there and making a difference in lives. This is something that people don't like to talk about. We kind of don't want to admit that that's around us. We don't know how to deal with someone that's maybe dealing with it. And you're providing solutions and ways to help people dealing with it and improve their lives and get their lives back on track. Yeah. And I think that's a very important calling. This is Building Solid Foundations Radio. Check us out every week. We are live on Thursdays and Sundays at 3 p.m. on KCAA. Catch us on the Building Solid Foundations channel on Roku, Fire TV, or Android. And we will see you next week. Until then, go do something different this week.
KCAA.